Hey guys, I'm Samson.
My name is Ekin.
My name is Alina.
My name is Gloria.
And I'm Julia.
And I am Samuel.
I'm Jan.
I'm Kane.
And we are the 99.
99.
99.
The
99. 99.
The
99.
99.
99.
The 99.
99.
Hello everyone. I'm Julia.
I'm Payne.
And I'm Samson.
And my name is Ekin, and we are
The 99.
And just a reminder that we created this podcast because we wanted to encourage Christians to continue to be faithful and be deeply rooted in the Word of God.
Okay guys, welcome back to our latest episode. Today's episode is going to be about stunting the youth's growth in the name of unity. So, in the Hmong churches, we know that there's a language barrier between us and the OGs, right? And the older generation, they tend to want us young generation to speak more Hmong or learn Hmong, right? And, even though we voice our concerns to the parents that it's going to be hard for us, our younger youth, to learn Hmong because, it's hard to start fresh learning a language that you've never spoken, right? Or ever practiced spoken. And, do you guys think it's fair that, as church leaders in the church have this mindset that our younger generation needs to speak our language or their language in order to be us, I guess, be a unity,
I feel like because maybe I'm a little biased, but we're born as Hmong people. We should know how to speak our language. And if this may really be controversial, but I feel like if your kid, sometimes it could be the parents, sometimes it could be the kids, But as the parent, it's your job to teach your kids to, speak Hmong. Like Chinese people, know how to speak Mandarin, and other ethnicity, they know how to speak their language. So what is the excuse for Hmong people? Yeah, I feel like we may not have a country, but that doesn't stop us from knowing our culture and, knowing our roots. Because then we, as the younger generation, we also shouldn't be a problem in creating that barrier. And I don't think it's just with church, but in general, you should know how to speak your own language because it is important. Because the older generation, they don't have education like us. And as the younger generation, who are more easy, where we have easily access to education, we should be the wiser one and the more educated one to learn to remain in our roots and our language and to, carry the older generation to Christianity and building that bridge.
Exactly. And in school, from elementary to high school and even college, there are Hmong classes that, if you don't know Hmong, you should be taking Hmong classes, especially as a Hmong person. When we come to church, it's not really our job to teach people how to learn Hmong, right? Our job is to...
Or culture-wise,
culture-wise, because our job is to spread the word of, God and to do His ministry, right? We can't stop our ministry so that we can teach you how to speak your own language. It's a little... It stems away from what ministry is.
I think I could see it from both ends, where I do agree that I think especially being in a Hmong church where there is this this idea of you are Hmong kids, you should speak, or I feel like we should at least understand the language.
Yeah.
I think it's one thing to speak it, and there's another thing to understand it. And does language, I think the question was does that is it fair to say that that's a way that a reason why we aren't united?
I mean, I think that's how, You know, a lot of parents, right? I feel like they feel like they're as youth, and then we're like, you know,
like
Like
separated,
separated,
because we
because of
don't
that language
understand
barrier, right?
because we don't understand each other
I
due to
think-
the language barrier.
It is like that, where there is definitely a language barrier, and I don't want to like point or like blame anyone for it, because I think even like being like us all being Hmong, I think, and especially growing up in like America and like going to school and stuff, like we do lose the language because it's not a language that we often use that much anymore. And it's like sad to say, but it is kind of truth. Like even like at home, like yeah, we could say it's like the parents, but I also understand that like they are also like in an English speaking country too, so it's like they have to learn to kind of adapt to like the language as well. So it is, I feel like, on like both groups, like us as the younger ones and also like the parents as well. But to say like use it as a way to like say that when it's because that the youth, you guys don't speak English, like we're not a church, or we're not like united together. I don't think that is like a good reason. Like I know it's like an excuse or something that, you know, older people do use, and it is definitely a hard thing to like overcome, because it's like what I forgot who was saying earlier, where it's like it's about like how the language is like not being used as often as well. But I feel like with language as well, like if you just kind of like listen and like you sit there, if you're truly like paying attention, like there are gonna be words and stuff that you pick up on. You're like, oh yeah, but
Well, because you know the reason why I'm pointing this out is because, you know, our church, right? We're lucky, you know, that we were able to have an English sermon, right? Like every second and fourth or third week. But you know, before that, right? We youth leaders noticed that before we had our English sermon, you know, a lot of our young youths who didn't, you know, who don't understand Hmong, right? They didn't really get that spiritual fed, right? Food, and I think, and that's why one reason why the youth department decided to have a English sermon, right? So our younger youth could better understand the sermon better, right? And that's why. But you know, a lot of parents, you know, they're like, oh, this is kind of like
A separation.
Yeah, like kind of like dividing the youth and the OGs. That's why not many churches are, I guess, open for English sermon, right? Because they feel like, oh, if they do that, then them and the young youth are no longer be like, you know, unity, you know.
I feel like not a lot of church, but a lot of church, you know, like the bigger mega church, they do have English sermon, you know, because they do have more pastor. Compared to us, a smaller church, it is harder for us to have English sermon because we don't have, we only have one pastor. And regarding to your question, whether, you know, language is a barrier between the older and the younger generation, it can be a barrier, but I don't think that is the main cause to why there is, you know, a misunderstanding between the younger and the older generation. I think it's because based on our understanding of God and our own perception of what the Bible is saying. A lot of the older generation, like the grandmas and the grandpa, you know, they tend to carry culture or the shaman culture into Christianity, where us new generation, we're not into, you know, the shaman culture like that. So we just take Christ as it is, and we don't really allow the shaman background to influence us anymore, you know, or the culture that the Hmong people hold. We don't exactly bring it to church because church is separate from the culture, you know. So yes, it is important to know like the Hmong language to, you know, still communicate, but I don't think that language barrier is the main factor. I think it's just that people are normally prideful and hard-headed, so we don't really understand each other where we come from. And obviously, yes, that language barrier does add to it, but it's not the main cause. Because when we look at other church, whether it's like a Mika church, there's so many like different denomination, and we all speak English. So how come is there different denomination? It's because of people different perspective about the Bible and their understanding of God. That's what I see from my observation and studies.
Yeah.
I do feel like it's more. I feel like they are kind of looking at it wrong too. I feel like they're looking at more from a family perspective rather than a
Yeah.
spiritual
Okay, yeah.
perspective. Because if we're talking about unity in the church, then all we really need is to be united in spirit and in the body. And as long we have that, we are, there is unity within. But I feel like with the language barrier and all that stuff, I think it's more for a family's perspective, and there is nothing wrong with family-oriented perspective, but it's more about, I don't know, I think I feel like it's more of like a make sure that there's like a number in the audience kind of view, where if there's a big number, then we're considered united. But having a big number doesn't necessarily mean that you are united.
I think it also has to do, like, I feel like it's easier to just kind of say language barrier, but I think it's also due to like the the church culture and like how things have been run for like a long time, and especially in, like, we're talking about the Hmong churches, like it's definitely like what is the reason behind a Hmong church? It's because it was a place where Hmong speaking people, like like the refugees and everyone, like they came together because it's the language they spoke, but like now we're in like a new like era of like you have a mix of like the older generation, but also a mix of like the younger ones who don't really understand the language. But you had to think back to like the past where the reason why there were Hmong churches was because it was like all they knew was Hmong, right? It's what they understood. And like even like throughout the years, a lot of like the Hmong church culture never really changed until like recently, where like younger ones are coming up saying like, oh, like we don't really understand the language anymore. And it is kind of sad to think about, because we are Hmong, right? I feel like we should have at least the understanding of the language. Like even for me, I can't write, I could read like enough, and my Hmong is not like 100% perfect, but it's like the understanding part
Enough to get by.
enough to get by. So I don't really want to say it's like it is language, yes, but I don't want to use it as a way to say it's like causing division or like it's
I
just
totally agree.
I just think it is just like the culture of like Hmong churches, where everybody in the last like 10 years like a lot of like people were still like understand, or like they still spoke the language and stuff like that. And a lot of like the things like church policies, church, like there's a lot of things that go into it, has never been like changed. Like a lot of things have stay same. And like I was saying, like now we have a younger generation kind of like we rising up, and it's like we have to think about like, oh, like is it the language that's causing like the division, or is it just it's just that we're not understanding, like how you're saying, it's like we don't understand like each other, because we're all raised in a different era. Like our parents, like their understanding of church, or their understanding of like how Julia said of like who God is it's kind of different. I just think it's not, well, we all know the same God, like that's what I'm trying to say, but at the same time it's like how we learned, or how we
go on through life. We learn God differently.
So now it's like it's I don't want to call it a challenge, but it's like just like our understanding now compared to like our parents, or the ones that come before us. It's just a little different, and change is, I think, one thing that kind of scares people too, is like, oh, if we we allow this, like, oh, like we're not united, oh, like we're two separate groups, but the truth is not, it's like how I forget, I think we brought this up, where we do all serve the same God, we all believe in the same God. It's just that our understanding or our way of learning is, or absorbing that is completely different now.
Yeah.
Okay, my thoughts, I totally agree. Like, I think there shouldn't, it doesn't matter if we speak, okay, okay, I don't think it matters if we Hmong and English, right?
Yeah.
Because, like you guys say, we're there to, like, serve God, right? And, like, grow with God, and language shouldn't be blocking us from growing with God and learning His words, right? And I yes, I agree. Like, it is important for us to know our roots, our Hmong language, right? But I think it's more important to go with Christ and do His ministry than trying to, I guess, well, more than keeping the language or your tradition, I guess, right? And all right, so how can, and then, okay, as leaders, right, in the church, how can we make the parents understand that spiritual growth for the youth is more important than
the languages
or like tradition and all that? Do you guys have any thoughts? How can we make the parent understand that the youth's spiritual need is more important than the language?
I think it's just being able to advocate that, like, especially as a leader, because for our perspective is like a leader, right? We see the youth group, we see, we know that they're not, like, growing spiritually is because they don't understand what pastor is saying, and I think like being able to advocate that, or being able to like point that out to like church leaders and say, like, hey, there is the issue, that we see, right, that our youth, or the youth, they're not growing because they don't understand the sermons. And I feel like, and it's okay to like say that, and I feel like, as for me, I don't want to come off as like a aggressive way, but like, I don't, in no means, right, but it's just maybe for us to just point it out to like the church leader, or then like pastor, to say like, hey, your sermons, pastor, like, do give really good sermons, right? And it's hard for us to, I know, before we try to and maybe this is a starting point where maybe as the leader, if you understand the language, you could like do like main points and just like post it up on like your church, your youth group, like social media, and like, hey, today's sermons, these are the points. But I think you have, after that, would have to advocate for something more, because let's be real, like, it becomes something that's like I don't want to call it tedious, but it's like, like, it's a lot too, but yep, just advocating.
I agree with Payne. Definitely advocating, and also ease into the parents' mind, because the older we get, obviously the more knowledge we gain, and then also leading to the more stubborn and prideful we can be. So obviously parents will always be parents. They think they will know better because they are parents. They live longer, they have more experience, more wisdom gained. So obviously, as the younger generation, it will be hard to convince parents. But what you have to do is slowly introduce them into the plan. Because for us and how we did it, it was really hard to even have single adults or even have sermon in the beginning, but we're like slowly introduce it. We have our pastor and our elders come and see our plans, and we will do like maybe just one English sermon for a month and see how it goes, just testing the water and introducing. And I think it also has to do with just being humble and open mind and not point fingers, that the reason why the youth are not getting spiritual feed is because pastor is speaking Hmong and he should also speak English so that we can understand. No, it's not that. Yeah, it's like it goes back to language barrier, but it's because we all learn differently and we're so used to different things. And that, yes, at the end of the day, the younger generation should know how to speak Hmong because it is their culture or their roots at the end of the day. But when we say Christ is more important, spiritual feeding is more important, and it is harder to learn your own language when you are already old enough, So definitely just ease into it. When you go and give your plan, don't be cocky or don't be stubborn, don't think, oh, my way is the right way, because then that's where you cause separation. That's where you cause anger, and you should approach it humbly. And if they don't agree with it, just let it go. Maybe the next year reapproach it again, because that's what we constantly did, after being denied. And maybe it was a good thing that we were denied in the beginning, because we obviously didn't have a good plan. But the more we thought about it, the year goes by, we had a better planning, and then pastor and the elder, they saw our vision and they approved of it. Take baby steps.
I think that we could be looking at it wrong too. I think we might see it as spiritual growth, but it's possible that the parents do see it as a form of separation. I think the issue is the lack of fellowship between the age gap that we have in our church.
Oh, that's true too.
I think with the departments, while of course the department is meant to benefit a specific age range and fathers and mothers too, because that's what we do teach, and the church does teach in those specific classes. But I think what the parents I like to believe that what they kind of crave for is to spend time with the younger generation too, to see how they are, to see how and obviously when
to feel included.
Yeah, to feel included in that too. I think what we need to do is show them that despite the different department, that we are still united. And even though of course language is a barrier, I think majority of our youth, they do know Hmong to some extent. The issue is that they're awkward around the older people. They don't know how to conversate, right? It's easier for people like us because we're leaders, so we have to work with different age ranges. So it's a lot more easier for us to go up to an older person and give them a handshake, or be like, oh, hi, right? And it's easier for them to say the same thing back to us. I have like a lot of mom and dad calling out my name down the hallway too, that I don't even know who they are, but it's because I work with them. I think there is a sense of unity with that, and I think it's simply just the lack of fellowship between the different age range. And even though language barrier will always be there, I think that as long like for guys, a simple nod, a simple head down, and that you're greeted, you've been acknowledged. I think that's what they need more, because our youth,
I agree,
they don't really. A youth is supposed to not just greet each other, but they're also supposed to greet the elders and the older people, and our youth don't really do that.
Sorry, go. I agree. Because there's just so many factors into what could be the possibility of separation and unity, and like you can say, it could be one of that. I feel like because there is that age gap, we're also awkward with each other, that we forget to greet each other, So as awkward as the younger generation can go and talk to the elder, I think it's also very awkward for the elders to come and talk to the younger generation, because it could, like I said, it could be because of that language barrier. The older generation, they don't know English as well, so they don't know how to commute with us, But a simple greeting, a simple handshake, or just an acknowledgement, a simple acknowledgement is very powerful, because it let you know, or it tells you that your presence, and it make other presence feel acknowledged. And that's what people like, being acknowledged and being involved, even if it's just a simple hi, handshake or hug.
Okay, I just want you can mention fellowship, and when he was talking about it, I was like, maybe I was thinking in my head, maybe next year, like like we have fifth Sundays, right? And we are each departments like they have their own
Little
thing for-
fellowship. Mhm.
Yeah, maybe next year, maybe instead like every fifth Sunday, maybe we do like a collab fifth Sunday with like all the or with I guess OG men and women and the
Mhm.
youth, right? Where we do like some kind of like activities
To
together.
continue that fellowship.
Yeah, like because like what Ekin was saying, maybe it's all about maybe that's how we break the barrier. Like
Mhm.
start getting our youth used to like fellowshipping, like doing activities with the OGs too. Because I know it's like at like Easter picnic or like maybe like we do our own activities,
Yeah.
right? But and yes, we do our own activities because like you say, we all feel comfortable with each other, right?
Mhm.
And we don't. Somebody you don't feel comfortable doing activities or with the older generation, the new J and the TJ. Maybe we need to start breaking that barrier by like having these like collab activities together, And like you said, honestly, some of the OGs, they actually do know English pretty good. So it's like, I don't think language barrier is the main problem, but I think it's just the fear of collabing with each other.
Because of different
Like,
generations.
yeah. So I think it's not really the language barrier, but it's like the generation barrier kind of. But no, in the beginning I mentioned our English sermon, right? And so I kind of want to talk about that, right? Because we talk about like churches having English sermon and all that. And what do you guys think? Do you guys think it's good for churches like us to have English sermon? What are the pros and cons for having English sermon?
I think it is good to have like English sermon because I think at the end of the day, it does come back to like spiritual growth, right? And if the younger generation is not getting it through like the Hmong sermons, like, we as like leaders or we as like the church or even church leaders, like we have to figure out a way to like spiritually feed them. And if it's through English sermon, I think it is like important as well, right? And I think like in a Hmong church, it's definitely like a pro and con.
Mhm.
Like if we kind of go back where it's like, I think there is that fear of like in service, right? Where the Hmong service is happening too, where I feel like it is like, I think for our church too, it's like our youth group does make up a good portion of our church, right? And I get the idea of like, okay, like if we were, the numbers, right? Because like, it's like, it is encouraging, right, to see like, I think as like the speaker or the pastor or if you're up there and you see the congregation, you see that church is filled, it makes you feel like, wow, like God is good. But I think it is like the idea of like, okay, there's like two separate groups. Like, are we, it goes back to the whole like idea of, are we united,
Mhm.
right? But I think there is a lot more pros than cons.
Mhm.
Like the cons is maybe it's just the fears that we have, but the pros is the younger ones now, the youth, they don't have an excuse now to not be able to like if I quote grow or spiritually like grow. It's like, before, like if we didn't have English sermon, they were like, oh, we don't understand, we just fall asleep because it's just a moment. How are we supposed to be able to pay attention?
Yeah.
But like now, if we have English sermon, like nobody really has an excuse to say, oh, like I don't understand it, or I don't like, it's in English, but I also feel like it's also a way to encourage like youth too, which I feel like it is the pro too to it. And but like here, this is my take too, where I feel like how we do it right now, it could change. My thoughts could change definitely in the future, but I think as of right now, like I feel like the way for our church specifically, I do feel like how we do it is pretty like, I feel like equal.
It worked out for us.
Because it is like half and half, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the weeks, right? Where it's like half the week we are with everyone in the service room, and then the other half, we have English sermon. And I know, like, if even in our church, like, pastor, like, he tries his best. Like, before, he did, like, just did it all in Hmong without, like, PowerPoints or anything. But I know, like, now he's been trying his best to, like,
Incorporate
English.
And then PowerPoint.
As simple as just post, like, putting up, like, the Bible verse, like, and I feel like it's been working, I hope. But yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I also agree with paying, there when it comes to spiritual feeding, we have to do what we can to, contain the sheep, to not lose any sheep. And if to not lose any sheep is to have an English sermon, then I think it is a great way, but the big fear in Hmong church is obviously separation because of language barrier. But we shouldn't let that stop us. And I agree with Sam. So, maybe we can slowly, maybe the fellowship in the future if the leaders decide, oh, we should collab with the J or the DJ, and just do like a big fellowship together. I think that's a great idea to, continue that fellowship and bond with one another. But English sermon, I definitely think it is important in the Hmong church, especially for the younger generation that don't understand or don't speak Hmong. So they get that spiritual feeding that they need. And, because we're constantly trying to water them and feeding them the God's word. That way, in the future, when they do become leader, they will also know how to work. Because our job as leader, my goal is, I'm going to train these, youth, and I'm going to train this future generation to take my place so that one day I can rest and do something else for God, because we cannot always be leading. Sometimes we also need to be guided. So we need to lead the future generation as well. So I think English sermon is very important, giving them that spiritual, and there's no excuse to not knowing about God. And you cannot blame, oh, well, I don't know about God because there was no English sermon. No, there is. You have no excuse.
Well said.
Anything again or no?
That's pretty much about it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, my last thought on this is, English sermon, I agree. It's really good for our youth, to grow. And again, English sermon is not to divide the church. It's actually to help our youth grow.
Yes.
As my thoughts. I know people have different thoughts of this, but that's my thinking on it. And to our viewers who are watching, I just want you guys to know, that we should stay united. We shouldn't let different language barrier or culture or generation barriers stop us from worshiping God together. And just want our viewers to know that it's in the future we should collab with each other and break these barriers. So if you guys enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube and check out our Instagram and our Facebook. But thank you for watching, guys. See you guys next time.